Hi, I'm Julius. So maybe you're just starting out with Prometheus and you've noticed that there's some metrics appearing in your Prometheus server, in the TSDB, in your queries that are not actually coming from the targets that you're monitoring. So the metrics are not in the exposition format of those targets, but they still show up. The most famous of these metrics is the up metric, but there's some others as well. And maybe you're wondering where are these coming from? What are they useful for? So let's have a look at that right now in this video. Okay, so to show you what's going on with these synthetic metrics, I'm running a Prometheus server that is scraping every 5 seconds. And it is scraping itself, right? That's a single target actually producing some real metrics. And it's also scraping a test job with a single target that is not producing any real metrics. So that's just an empty metrics endpoint that can be scraped and is valid, but is completely empty. So let's go over to Prometheus to see what that looks like. So if we go to the targets page, we see those two targets and we can see that Prometheus itself is scraped and you can see a number of metrics coming there. And the test target can also be scraped, it's up, but it's completely empty. So we don't see any metrics in its output. So that's valid, but there's just no metrics here. However, if we go to the graph tab in Prometheus and we query for all the metrics coming in from that test job, which we can do like this, we still see some metrics actually being stored and being returned by the query. And these are these synthetic metrics that I mentioned, with the most prominent one being the up metric, but we can see there's some other ones as well. And so these are metrics that Prometheus just automatically records for every scrape that it does for a particular target. And the labels on these metrics, in this case instance and job with particular values, are exactly the labels of the target that was scraped. So the same labels as we can see here under this targets labels column for the particular target. So if you change these for a target in your Prometheus configuration or the service discovery, then these labels on the synthetic metrics will change as well. Okay, so on to the meaning of these metrics. The up metric just tells you whether Prometheus was able to scrape the target correctly. So Prometheus sets that to a sample value of 1 for any scrape that succeeded. And it sets it to 0 if the scrape failed for whatever reason. So that could be, the exposition format was broken, or Prometheus couldn't look up the DNS name for the target. Maybe their connection was interrupted. Maybe there was a timeout. Any reason that leads to a scrape failure will set this metric to a 0. And yeah, we can actually try that. So I can, kill this target in the background. And we should be seeing that this up metric, if I execute this again, now goes to 0. And if I just query this particular metric by itself as a graph, we can see that change even happening here. So the up metric was 1 and then it goes down to 0. So that is very helpful for very basic health alerting. If you just want to make sure whether Prometheus can actually scrape all your targets correctly. So you could compare this metric or the up metric for a particular job, let's say, to the value of 0 and find any instances that are currently down, which could be a very basic health alert. All right, so these other metrics here are less prominent, but they can still sometimes be useful. So you have the actual duration of the scrape. This can help you pinpoint super slow scrapes, targets that maybe don't even produce a lot of metrics, but just take a lot of time to return the metrics. Then we have the number of samples that got scraped in this one single scrape from that target. So that helps you just very easily find targets with large numbers of time series and thus samples. And we have the number of samples after relabeling. So during the actual scrape and before storing the scraped metrics in the TSDB, in your Prometheus configuration file, you can have some filtering steps in relabeling that remove some of the metrics. And so this number might be lower than the actual scraped number of samples. And finally, we have the number of time series that got newly added as a result of this particular scrape that were not present in a previous scrape of the same target before. So this can help you find targets that produce a lot of new time series all the time. So churn, as we like to call that, which can get expensive for Prometheus because Prometheus will need to index and store and process all these new and changing time series all the time. By the way, you can also find a list and an explanation of all these synthetic metric names on the Prometheus homepage. If you go to the docs and you go to concepts and jobs and instances, there's a section called automatically generated labels and time series. And that also, again, just explains the meaning of all of these once more. All right, so I hope this was useful for you to understand where these metrics are coming from and what you can do with them. If you want to learn Prometheus right now in a more structured way, check out my training courses at training.promlabs.com and like and subscribe. See you in the next one.